If you're a leader, you understand that accountability is the absolute foundation of any high-performing team. But what happens when that foundation starts to crack? Well, it's usually not some big dramatic event. It's a series of small, quiet fractures. So today, we're going to walk through a really powerful framework that helps you spot and, more importantly, address those subtle behaviors that quietly break accountability, long before the whole thing comes tumbling down.
This quote from Tarek Fawaz, it's just so spot on because it gets to a really difficult truth. Accountability doesn't just vanish overnight. It erodes, little by little, through all those small, inconvenient behaviors that we, as leaders, sometimes just let slide. You can think of them like tiny cracks in a sidewalk. One seems harmless, but over time, if you don't tend to them, they can compromise the whole structure. And that's our job, right? To learn how to spot these cracks early.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to get a handle on exactly how accountability starts to wear away. Then we'll dig into 3 really common patterns of behavior that can speed up that erosion. And finally, we'll get to what I think is a critical shift in perspective, one that shows us not just the real problem, but a much better way to solve it.
Okay, so let's be super clear. We are not talking about a single missed deadline here, or one loud disagreement. The real danger, the thing we have to watch out for, is in the unaddressed patterns. Those patterns send a quiet message to the rest of the team that our standards are flexible, that fairness might be optional, and that ultimately, trust is a risk. That's the subtle erosion we've got to stop in its tracks.
All right, our first pattern, this one is all about toxic behavior, and right out of the gate, we need to make a really important distinction here. We are diagnosing observable behaviors, okay? We are not labeling a person as toxic. The whole focus here is on specific actions that have a clear and damaging effect on the team's sense of psychological safety.
Just look at the direct line between the signals here and the impact they have. Let's take something that can seem kind of minor, like someone who's constantly using sarcasm as a weapon. The impact isn't just a few bad jokes. It's that confusion starts to replace clarity. People on the team stop being sure of what's actually being said. And when these kinds of behaviors are just tolerated, that psychological safety net collapses. So the key resolution for a leader is to address the behavior directly, calmly, and protect the team's norms for everyone.
Next up is a pattern that I think a lot of leaders really struggle with, the low performer. And again, we're not talking about someone just having an off week. We're looking at a consistent pattern of underdelivery and the incredible ripple effect it has on the whole team.
Yeah, the signals here are probably pretty familiar to a lot of us, but really look at the impact. Sure, the overall standards might drop, but maybe the most damaging effect is on your best people. Your high performers start to burn out because they're constantly picking up the slack, and the team's entire sense of fairness just evaporates. The resolution here demands clarity and speed. You have to define what's non-negotiable, figure out if you're dealing with a skill gap or a will gap, and then you have to act. Letting this pattern just linger is deeply unfair to everyone else.
Now, our third pattern can be really tricky because it often looks like simple ambition, but there is a huge difference. You see, healthy ambition drives the team forward against outside competition. This pattern, though, is about an obsessive drive to win inside the team, often at the expense of your own colleagues.
And you can see just how this kind of internal competition poisons the well of collaboration. When someone is constantly protecting their own visibility, knowledge sharing is no longer free-flowing. It becomes a transaction. Trust becomes conditional. The whole team dynamic shifts from what's best for us to what's in it for me. And really, the only way to solve this is to realign the entire system by rewarding the collective wins and making team success the most important, most measurable outcome there is.
So we've looked at 3 really challenging patterns, but now we come to the most important, the most profound takeaway from this entire framework. Seriously, this is the shift in thinking that separates a good manager from a truly great leader. Just let that sink in for a second. Personality is not the problem. We cannot and we absolutely should not try to solve or fix a person's fundamental personality. That path only leads to judgment, frustration, and ultimately failure. The real problem, the thing we can address, is the unmanaged pattern of behavior. This is the crucial shift. See, our job as leaders isn't to be some kind of armchair psychologist trying to fix a personality. Our job is to be a clear, consistent manager of behavior and a guardian of our team's standards. It completely moves our focus from that unanswerable question, how do I fix this person, to the much more actionable one, how do I address this observable pattern?
And this, right here, This is the very definition of leadership maturity. It's the ability to see these patterns early on and to intervene with both empathy and clarity before trust erodes. It's about recognizing that we are ultimately responsible for the standards we set, and maybe even more importantly, for the behaviors we tolerate.
So as we wrap up, I'll leave you with this question to really think about. Based on everything we've covered, which unmanaged pattern on your team, no matter how small it might seem right now, needs your thoughtful attention first? Because addressing that is the first, most important step to rebuilding a solid foundation of accountability.